Trying to determine where each player should be ranked in the top 20 is much more of a difficult task than it has been in previous years. And in my opinion, one of the hardest portions of the list to order is rank 7 to 10. So with this video, I'm going to give you as much information as I can about the 5 major contenders for these ranks: Wizzrobe, aMSa, axe, SFAT, and Zain, so that you can make an informed decision on what your personal SSBM summer rank would look like. First off, let's look at all of these players' placings at the larger events that at least 3 of them have attended so far this year. Before we jump into it, I just want to clarify that on this chart and every subsequent chart, these 5 players are listed in the order of their rankings on the Melee Stats PR that was published in late April. Now with that clarified, let's get into it. If we're going to rank these players strictly by lowest average ranking at these events, we'd see aMSa in first place, with Wizzy and Zain close behind in second and third respectively. But all of these players consistently perform really well at events, with Axe's 25th at Full Bloom being the worst performance by rank on here, which was an unfortunate side effect of both him and Swedish Delight getting knocked into losers early. There are also a lot of great performances by players that aren't being shown here, like Wizzrobe's first placing at Optic Arena where he double eliminated Hungrybox, and Axe's second place finish at Flatiron where he took a set off Levin, so you can't strictly judge these average performances at events with just this chart. What you take out of this infographic largely depends on where you fall on the age-old debate in Melee rankings of consistency versus peaks. Does Zain getting 3rd at Summit overshadow some of his weaker performances? And how valuable is SFAT's ability to perform exactly as he's expected to, are just some of the questions you'll have to answer directly or indirectly when placing your top 10. So now with a general feel of how each of these players have performed so far this year, let's take a look at how they have fared against the top 6 in the world so far. The first thing that stands out is that SFAT is the only player among these 5 that does not have a single set win against a top 6 player. Every other player actually has wins against 2 different top 6 players, whereas SFAT is 0-8 against them. Zain also stands out on this list, as he's not only the only player to have a positive head-to-head record against the player, but he is also the only one to have beaten Plup or Mango on this list. The big question to be asking yourself here is how valuable is a win over each of the top 6 worth to you? Questions like, is having wins over Hungrybox and Mewtwo worth more to you than having 2 wins over Mango and a win over Plup, are again something you're going to have to answer. And lastly, we have the most important and most dense graphic to unpack here: each player's best wins and worst losses so far this year. There's a whole lot of data going on here, so if you want to get the best understanding possible, I'd implore you to pause the video for a bit and look over these numbers for yourself. But if you're not able to take the time to do that, let's quickly synthesize what we can take away from this. All of these players have a lot of wins in the 11 to 25 range, and we're not able to completely parse them without their full head-to-head records, but as a whole, these players all have very similar win resumes in this range. As for the 10 to 7 range, Wizzrobe and aMSa appear to be slightly above the rest of the pack, but aMSa's wins here are a bit deceiving, as he has a losing record against 3 of those players, with him being 1-2 against Wizzy and Axe and 2-3 against SFAT. Wizzy, on the other hand, is 1-0 against Axe, 2-1 against SFAT, and 1-1 against S2J. Finally, we have the losses. All of these players have at least 1 loss outside the top 25, but aMSa and Axe are the 2 players with the cleanest records, as they both have multiple top 10 players in their worst losses by rank. Zain stands out from the pack again in this category, as he's the only player to have suffered a loss to an unranked player, but he doesn't have nearly as much depth in his losses as SFAT does. And I think that about does it for a general view of this chart. So then in what order should these 5 players be ranked? It's ultimately your choice, but I don't think this video feels complete without giving you my personal perspective on where everyone should be ranked. I think giving the 11th spot to SFAT is the easiest choice to make on this list. Not having any top 6 wins, while also having some of the worst losses on the list to Kalamazoo, Captain Smuckers, and Cyrox, makes it hard to justify putting him above any of these other players. Next up at 10th and 9th, we have Zain and then Axe. This was a tough choice to make, but Zain's losses and Axe's consistency is what gives Axe the edge here for me. I always like to remind people the question for ranking players is, imagine if everyone entered a tournament 100 times, who would perform the best? And with things like losses to an unranked player in the Marth video and being double eliminated by Smuckers at the gang, I'm not wholeheartedly convinced of Zain's mastery of non-Spacies matchups. I do agree that him getting 3rd at Summit is an incredible feat, but personally, I don't think it negates his bad losses enough to put him above axe. And in 8th and 7th, we have a very similar argument of peaks versus consistency with aMSa and Wizzrobe, and honestly, I was all set on giving the 7th place to Wizzrobe because of his amazing win over Hungrybox, but if I'm putting axe over Zain for consistency, I must have to give 7th to aMSa over Wizzrobe also for consistency. But after looking more at the stats and thinking over it some more, I think they're about the same consistency level, but Wizzrobe has better peaks. Now obviously the first counter argument to this should be, but Wizzrobe has much worse losses than aMSa, which was concerning to me at first glance, but let's take a little closer look. Wizzrobe's worst loss to 51st ranked Kells came at the GHQ Regionals in set 1 of Grand Finals, but Wizzy beat him in the second set and won the event. His second worst loss came against Cobalt and Momo Khan in winners quarters, but Wizzrobe beat him when they met in losers semis at the same event. And then his third worst loss to none came at Full Bloom 4 in round 16 of winners, and guess what? Wizzrobe beat him later in the event in losers. West Balls is actually the only exception to this rule in 2018, because even Hungrybox wasn't able to double eliminate Wizzrobe at an event this year. So in my eyes, these losses aren't nearly as concerning, because if Wizzrobe lost to these players at the first of these hypothetical events, I would expect him to win most of the next 99. And then as previously mentioned, Wizzrobe is even or has a positive record against all the players in the 7 to 10 range that he's already played against, whereas aMSa has a negative head-to-head record against these same players. So with these two things and a better peak achieved by double eliminating Hungrybox to win Optic Arena, I have to give the 7th spot to Wizzrobe. And yeah, that's about it for this video. I'd love to hear what your list looks like down in the comments below, because all these players are so close to each other that I could very realistically see players being 2 or 3 different spots away from where I put them on my list, depending if you value peaks more, or you look at that consistency metric with aMSa and Wizzrobe a little bit differently than me. I'm really excited to see what you guys take out of it, and where you end up placing everyone else. Moving forward, because we kind of have a lull coming up with the Summer of Melee up until EVO, we do have CEO coming up next week, which I'll probably be making a preview video for. I'm thinking about doing a ranking video for 4 to 6, and that'll be probably very applicable depending on what happens at CEO, and then maybe doing an 11 to 15, but if ranking 7 to 10 is hard, 11 to 15 or even like 11 to 20 is tremendously difficult with how many good players there are. It's going to be a wild video if I end up undertaking that task. And before I end off this video, I want to give a huge thanks to my Patreons, because with their support, I was able to upgrade my audio setup that you've hopefully noticed, because before I was using a coat hanger with a sock on it as my pop filter. It is a very good way to make a cheap pop filter, but not the optimal option for doing that, and get a real mic instead of using a mic I borrowed from my university and never gave back. But it's been tremendously awesome, even though I still have to work out the kinks and kind of figure out what exactly is the best environment for this audio setup. But I want to give a huge thanks to my Patreons for doing that. Nick Fade, Daniel Gilbert, Sam Wright, Edwin Budding, JD, Blair Alexander, Bootstring, Grant Mercer, Toussaint, Caleb Schumacher, and Grayson Harding for all of your support. I can't thank you guys enough. It's so nice to not have to talk into a sock. I think it's better for all of us here. But if you want to join the hallowed halls of the Patreons I just mentioned and get a shout out like them and also get videos early, you can click the link down in the description or in the card in the top right corner to get a little bit more information. And that's been about it. I've been SaveAsUntitled. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys next time.